This video demonstrates the process of identifying our last row of data using the n-count variable and summing the quantity, subtotal, tax, total, and undiscounted total columns. Once all of the data is written for our state into the CSV file, we want to create a string variable from our n-count variable that identifies the last row of data. The last row of data is not simply the n-count number after we have run the bot. The n-count variable does not start counting until it logs a row of data for my state into the CSV file. Thus, the counter skips counting the header row and the blank row that we saw at the top of the CSV file when we looked at it after writing the header row. To account for the fact that the counter skipped the first two rows, the blank row and the header row, we need to add 2 to our n-count variable before converting it to a string. If we do not adjust for the header row and skipped row, then our column sum formula will miss some rows of data for our state. Missing data is problematic because we will be comparing the values obtained from summing the columns to the economic nexus thresholds for our state to see if our online popcorn retailer must collect sales tax in this state. We don't want to find our last row until we've written all of the data out to our CSV file. So our next 2 commands are going to be outside of both the if statement and the loop statement. They're going to appear on lines 25 and line 26 of the code. We're going to remain on the actions menu, and we're going to be at the numbers option, and then we're going to, in this case, convert a number to a string. So we want to go ahead and find the toString action and double click to move it onto our workbench. Just like we could move items up on our workbench, we can move them outside of both the if statement and loop statement easily by clicking on it and dragging it to where we would like it to go. We're going to go ahead and configure our toString action by first entering in the number that we're going to start with, which after we've run our bot and we have all of our rows of data written will be our n-count variable. We're going to go ahead and click Yes, Insert. And then we want to go ahead and add 2 to that variable. So we're going to put in a plus sign and then add 2 to account for our skipped row and our header row. We don't need to deal with the enter number of digits after the decimal, so we can leave that at 0. And then in the assign box, now we want to assign this new amount to our S last row string variable. We can go ahead and click on apply. The last thing that we want to do is now we want to log into our file the formulas that will allow us to sum our columns. So we can go ahead and collapse our number menu and then navigate back up to the log to file command. And then we can go ahead and double click on log to file to move the log to file action onto our workbench. Here, we're going to configure this just as we have with all the other times. We're going to go ahead and click on the browse, and we're going to find our CSV file. Now we're going to enter the text that we'd like to log into the file. We need to remember 2 things. The first thing that we need to remember is that we delineate columns in a CSV file using commas. So if we don't want to sum a particular column, like our record ID or our order number or our year, then we're going to want to go ahead and put in several commas to tell the bot to go ahead and keep moving over to different columns so that we put the sum functions in the right columns. So we're going to start by entering just 3 commas in a row so that we skip our record ID, our order ID, and year columns. The second thing that we want to remember is that the CSV file is going to treat a formula just like Excel would. So it'll automatically convert the text that we're entering here in the bot into a formula when it pulls it into the CSV file. So we can go ahead and begin with our equals, and then we're going to sum columns. And our data starts on row 3. So we're now going to be in the 4th column, or column D, and we're going to want it to start at column D, row 3. Then we put in the colon to tell it to go all the way to, and then we're going to put in our D, and now we want to enter in a variable here. We want to enter in our last row variable because we don't know what that's going to be before it starts writing the data out, and we'd hate to run this a couple times, so we can just go ahead and put in the last row amount so that it knows to go all the way from cell D3 down to D whatever the last row is. Enter a comma. Then we can go ahead and skip our product price because it doesn't make any sense to sum the product price column, but we would like to sum our subtotal column. So we can go ahead and sum. Now we're in column F, and we're going to do the same thing where we enter in F3, and then we're going to choose our last row variable and then close our parens. Then we can also sum our tax column, which would be column G. And then sum our total column, which is in column H. We can then skip our state column, and the last column that we want to sum will be our undiscounted total column. So we can go ahead and start with column J, cell J3, and then sum all the way down to J last row. And once we have all of the data that we'd like to have written into our CSV file, again, this is only going to occur once because we've pulled it all the way outside of our loop. We can go ahead and verify that we have the right default settings and then click apply and then save. And now we can finally run our bot again so that it will write the data into our CSV file for our state. Because we added this, we still would see our dashboard if we clicked back on the Analyze button. But now we can also navigate into our CSV file, and we can see that the bot has done exactly what we asked it to. It wrote the header row, then it wrote the data for each time it identified an order going to the state of Maine. And then finally, it summed the columns for us that we were interested in so that we can compare these values to our economic thresholds for the state of Maine.